12 minutes past 7 now. This morning we're asking, here's a question. At a time of big cutbacks in Britain, should the European Union be considering a big rise in its budget? A 3% hike could be on the cards, but at an EU summit in Brussels, David Cameron's been trying to get that reduced over the last couple of days. So how important is the EU to us? And should we be contributing more to it? We can get the views. Two of our local Euro MPs, Conservative Malcolm Harbour and the independent MEP Nikki Sinclaire. Nikki Sinclaire, first to you in Brussels. The EU asking for an astonishing amount of money initially, were they not?
Yeah, 6%. You actually said 3%. And actually, the Parliament voted through last week 5.9%. And David Cameron said he's got a small coalition of 10 that wants to reduce it to 3. Obviously, to have a majority, he actually needs 14, and he hasn't got that 14 yet.
Yeah, there's a good point well made in that. At a time when not just Britain, but countries across the EU haven't, across Europe haven't got a lot of money to play around with. The EU is asking for a lot of money.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely beggars belief that austerity measures going through the whole of the EU, including the UK, look, 27% decrease in council that councils have to spend, 23% on Home Office, 8% on defence, and yet the European Union wants 6%. And part of that 5.9% was an 85% increase in its entertainment budget to €2 million. That's to spend on champagne, subsidised canteens for visiting delegations, etc., etc. You know, and when they put these votes through last week, they applauded themselves as if they had achieved something great by this. They've just got no idea. They're divorced from reality.
So what are you saying? Charity starts at home?
Well, absolutely. We're the second lot. We pay £45 million currently into the EU per day. They make 75% of our laws. I think this is a social experiment that's gone wrong. I think I have a mobile surgery that goes around the West Midlands twice a week. It's been in Hereford a few weeks ago. And the message I'm getting from the people is that they're fed up. They've been promised a referendum constantly by both sides of the political spectrum. They never get this referendum. And, you know, now David Cameron is trying to do his best to avoid a referendum on a possible change to the Lisbon Treaty.
Now, are you actually anti-EU, Nikki Sinclaire? It sounds to me like...
Well,
wait a minute, because it sounds like you're just trying to talk yourself out of a job a little bit there.
Well, as soon as I was elected, I said I'm actively campaigning for my own redundancy and the redundancy of every other UK MEP. You know, each MEP costs the taxpayer £2.1 million a year. It's absolutely ridiculous amount of money. And you know, we need to be governed by our own Parliament in Westminster, as we've done for centuries. We're an active player in the world. We're a permanent member of the UN Security Council. You know, we're a senior member of the Commonwealth. We can trade with the world. We don't need to be part of this small protectionist Eurozone.
All right. All right, yeah, look, Nikki Sinclaire, you made your point.
At a time of big cutbacks in Britain, the European Union is considering an increase in its budget. A 6% hike was on the cards, but at an EU summit in Brussels, David Cameron's been trying to get that reduced to around about 3%. Looks like he may well have been successful. He's got support from a group of other member states as well. How important, though, is the EU to us, and should we be putting in more cash into the pot? Let's get the view of one of our local Euro MPs, independent MP Nikki Sinclaire, with us on BBC Coventry and Warwickshire. Nikki, good morning.
Good morning.
Should we be paying any sort of increase, do you think?
Absolutely not. I mean, it absolutely beggars belief at these times of austerity across Europe, and here in the UK, where it's minus 27% on local council expenditure, minus 8% on defence, minus 23% on Home Office. The European Parliament actually voted through a 6% increase. You know, we pay £45 million into the European Union every single day. That's actually a net figure. That's after we get everything back. And we just simply can't afford it. It's a social experiment that is failed. We cannot afford, and it's about time we left the European Union.
Just give us that figure again. How much we're paying in per day net once we've had the benefits back?
Well, this is actually prior to the increase. It's £45 million a day.
Okay, and that's the increase that's being voted on at the minute.
Well, the increase, if we obviously have a 3%, I mean, why are we cutting, for example, council expenditure at 27%? Now, that affects things, for example, like libraries being closed down, education expenditure, and loads of just everyday things that you take for granted will increase because of this 27% decrease. And at the same time, the European Union is increasing its budget 5.9% with the Parliament voted through last week, which included a €2 million expenditure on champagne and subsidised canteens for MEPs and visiting delegations. What type of measures? And you know what? When they voted through these measures last week in Strasbourg, they actually applauded themselves. How out of touch are these Europhiles with the reality of people, not just in the UK, and we've never had a referendum.
OK, Nick, let's leave it there for the minute. Let's bring in Conservative Malcolm Harbour, one of our other Euro MPs as well. Malcolm, good morning. Thanks for joining us this morning. Nicky, absolutely clear on this one. It's a waste of the money. We shouldn't be paying any more than we currently do, if not less. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I agree that we shouldn't be paying more than we currently do, but I disagree with Nikki, because as you've heard, you've heard a long rant about why we shouldn't be in the European Union. We should be in the European Union because it's vital for jobs and the economy, particularly around Coventry and Warwickshire. It's absolutely crucial to give us access to those markets, to make sure we're part of that bigger market. But,
is it worth 45 million a day, though? Is it worth 45 million a day?
Yes, it is. It clearly is. And this is part of the government's policy. But, the issue at the moment that we're talking about, the reason you rung is where we are now.
Sure, yeah.
We can have the arguments on another time about whether we should be in or not. And I just remind your listeners that, we're talking about a piece of government policy that's been going on for a long time. We're also giving money, I remind everybody, for international development, for overseas aid, because we're doing that because we believe it benefits the United Kingdom. We're even protecting and increasing that budget. So let's remember, let's not sort of focus on things in isolation. Now, where we are now is that the government and David Cameron has been very successful in Brussels now to get particularly France and Germany to support him in negotiations that will come up with the European Parliament. And by the way, I agree entirely with Nikki. One of the few things I agree with her about is we should have had a standstill on the budget. We voted for that. We voted against the budget. We voted against the increase in the European Parliament's budget for those extra expenses. That was our clear policy. But the position now is that governments can negotiate with the European Parliament face-to-face, and they will do so. And the crucial France and German involvement means that there is now a blocking minority against what the European Parliament has proposed, and we're going into those negotiations. Now,
Malcolm, you mentioned that the debate, this isn't necessarily a debate of whether it should be in Europe or not, but it kind of comes back, they're inexorably linked, aren't they? Just the fact that there's this, that the increase is proposed, that David Cameron's come out and said, no, we shouldn't be paying this much, we should be paying far less.
But, what we're talking about, but you're talking about...
They're inexorably linked, though, aren't they?
Well, can I just put this into context? This pales into insignificance beside the fact that the last Labour government, by giving away Britain's negotiated rebate on the European budget, has saddled us with a 40% increase this year already. Something your listeners need to know about, and that's what we have inherited from the Labour Party. Now, the European budget is done on a 5-year cycle. There are commitments in there already, a bit like the aircraft carriers, which, again, we've seen how Labour negotiated that so badly, so we can't get out of those. The crucial thing now is that for the next 5-year cycle, that we have an entirely different approach to the European budget. What we're not hearing in Brussels are things like value for money, an austerity budget, cutting back on unnecessary expense. That's the culture that this government will bring in over the next year. And we as the Parliament then will need to get down to behaving entirely sensibly and rationally about bringing a budget in line, I think, and showing that we accept our responsibility.
OK, Malcolm, let's leave it there with you for the moment. Thank you very much. Nikki Sinclaire, we need to act sensibly, need to act rationally. Will you do that as one of our local MEPs on our behalf of the taxpayers of this country?
Of course I do, and I do represent the constituency, but I actually just want to come back on a couple of things. How Malcolm on Coventry and Warwickshire Radio can say about the EU bringing us jobs, when actually it was EU actually funded jobs to take jobs out of Brighton and replace them in Slovakia. We do not depend on the EU for jobs. Most of our trade is outside with the EU on our exports. And it's about time. We've been promised a referendum. Here's our elected government, who was only elected a number of months ago, and he's only got 10 supporters at the moment, only 10 countries. He needs 14. And if our own elected government can't say no to this extra expenditure, what are we doing there? It's about time that we have it. And that's why I'm in Nuneaton today with my mobile surgery, and I'm going across the West Midlands on a weekly basis, and people can see this website and actually have on their say on haveyoursay.eu, and they can have their say on the EU, and I invite your listeners to do that today.
OK, Nikki, thanks a lot for your time this morning. Two of our local Euro MPs.